Some 20 years ago, the scholar and astrologer Robert Hand wrote an article about a topic that he calls postmodern astrology, and he also gave some lectures about it. This is Hand's article, and it can be found on the popular website astro.com. I'll link it in the description. And I've also linked to a video of Robert Hand lecturing about this topic, about postmodern astrology. And as Robert himself admits, it's really a bit unfortunate that he chose the term postmodern, because his subject has absolutely nothing to do with the philosophical labyrinth that was created by the French philosopher Jacques Derrida and his buddies during the last decades of the 20th century. Hand is simply referring to a new flavor of astrology that he would like to see developed in the 21st century. So an astrology of the near future or something like that. And if you check out his article or the videos about it, you'll notice that Hand is basically setting an agenda that might help astrology move forward in the 21st century, or at least that's what he hopes for. And well, I applaud that hope. You could say that he is challenging a new generation of astrologers to come up with some new solutions for old problems. He specifically challenges us to work on two major issues. And number one is that Robert Hand says we need a coherent philosophical foundation for astrology. I really agree with that. And according to Hand, this foundation should be rooted in some form of idealism. That is to say, the philosophy of mind over matter and soul over stuff, and not the other way around, because that would be materialism. And Robert Hand thinks that materialism and astrology are totally incompatible. And by the way, idealism also happens to be the philosophical tradition that I personally prefer or subscribe to. And not only that, I also agree with Hand's position that materialism and astrology are really incompatible. Without going into the details, I'll just say that if you stick to a materialist paradigm based on, something like hypothetical planetary rays or other funky types of influence, it's basically impossible to account for the precision of asteroid correlations if you think in materialist terms. I mean, asteroids are just too small and unmaterial to make any difference. And you definitely need a meaning-based paradigm for asteroids. And since that is my personal specialization, I completely agree with Robert Hand on that. Okay, he also has a second challenge for the new generation. He also thinks that it might be possible to create a new kind of maybe meta-astrology or something like that takes the best bits from various traditions and integrates them in new ways. And the goal of this synthesis would be for Robert Hand to improve the overall level of technical knowledge among professional astrologers. That's something he really cares about. So that's, a very pragmatic idea, and maybe that would be useful for certain professional astrologers. But on the other hand, we all know that astrologers love to fight among themselves about which techniques work better. So realistically, I think that, for medical reasons or something like that, only people with a very thick skin should try to create a new astrological synthesis that is, as ambitious as Robert Hand would intend it to be. So, in this video, I'm going to respond to the first challenge that Robert Hand gives us, because I actually think that I've come across something that's useful. And that's not because I'm a skilled philosopher, that's really not what I am, but I simply think that the hard philosophical work has already been done by Mr. Bernardo Kastrup. And although you may not know him, he is in fact a fairly well-known philosopher and also a computer engineer. I get the impression that so far astrologers haven't really noticed Kastrup's work, so in this video I will try to do something about that. Basically by pointing to Kastrup's interpretation of Jungian synchronicity which he developed in this book. It's really a must-read book. I think it's called Decoding the Metaphysics of Carl Jung. And I will try to explain some of Kastrup's ideas in a simplified way. And I mean, it gets quite complex, so I'll try to make it a bit more simple and easy to understand. And also, I will try to give a bit of astrological context, because well, Mr. Kastrup himself is not going to do that. He is not a big fan of astrology. And if I'm really honest, I cannot blame him for that. But it just so happens that the flavor of synchronicity that Kastrup has come up with is really very, very astrology friendly, at least in my opinion. And maybe after this introduction, you are wondering what my personal motivation is for this video. I also want to explain that. Well, first of all, I just told you, I think just like Robert Hand, that 21st century astrology really needs a coherent metaphysical foundation, because what that gives you is a possibility to weed out inconsistencies and, you know, theoretical weak spots, flaws, and maybe even some pure nonsense. And more specifically, like I just said, I'm an asteroid specialist, and I think in order to prepare for a future where asteroids are included in astrology, I think we need more theoretical clarity. And I'm not talking about theoretical clarity for people who use a handful of popular asteroids like Chiron or Ceres, you know, those ones. But I'm talking about my approach, having hundreds or even thousands of asteroids in your bag of tools, which, by the way, isn't as hard as it sounds, but that's a different subject. But anyway, if you start integrating substantial amounts of asteroids, you will find some really unexpected and weird stuff that you don't find when you only work with planets or with fixed stars. And in my opinion, sooner or later you will get some discussions about classic philosophical problems like nature of time, cause and effect, determinism and free will, all these classical philosophical problems. It's really, the asteroids have something to say about that. So that is one more reason why I want to address this subject. Before I go into the details of Bernardo Kastrup's solution to what Robert Hand would like to see, this philosophical foundation, I first want to mention two famous astrologers who have also contributed to solving this riddle or this problem in recent years. Bernadette, Brady, and especially Richard Tarnas are, well, you could say philosophically minded astrologers, just like Robert Hand. And I guess that they probably share Robert Hand's concern about the lack of a theoretical foundation. Bernadette Brady has, in 2014, she presented an up-to-date version of her cosmological ideas. She had previously already written, I think, a thesis about it, or at least one book earlier. But her book Cosmos, Chaosmos and Astrology, published by the Sophia Press. In that book, she lays out her proposition, and that centers around two concepts: chaosmos, and especially, I think, especially the Stoic concept of Sympatheia. This Sympatheia, it is a thing that is closely related to Jungian synchronicity, I would say. It has spooky action at a distance and stuff like that. And in the description of this video, I've also included a link to a fairly recent podcast with Brady about this topic. And if you're going to watch that, there's one thing I want to say about it, because I don't always agree with the terminology that Bernadette Brady uses. Especially in that video, her use of the word reductionism is a bit unsatisfying to me, because it seems that she's referring to this well-known idea that 20th century physicists kept searching for smaller and smaller and smaller subatomic particles, reductionism. And yeah, that was indeed, at least it seemed to me at the time, already a fairly hopeless situation, like a dog chasing its tail or something like that. But this problem has been solved, fortunately, and not by astrologers, of course, but by theoretical physicists. And of course, that's the way it should be. You have physicists like here, this is Mr. Nima Arkani Hamed, and these people have simply found that if you go to ever smaller and smaller, distances, the fabric of space-time really breaks down. And there's a word for that, the Planck scale, that is super, super tiny scale, 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, if you can imagine anything like that. But anyway, it's really like a cosmic stop sign for subatomic particle hunters, It says, go back, nothing to see here, and if you try to measure these distances, then your measuring apparatus will cause a nuclear explosion. So, in other words, there's no more operational meaning to time and space, or space-time, I should say, at that scale. And that has led to a very funny slogan: "Space-time is doomed." If you've never heard of it, well, I suggest you Google it. And also, especially, there's a famous, or at least I think is he famous? He should be famous. The scientist Donald Hoffman, his take on this subject is very interesting. Donald Hoffman, double F. Just Google "space-time is doomed" and you'll find it. Okay, Brady's theory, back to her Chaosmos and Sympatheia. What she does also in her book and in her expose of how she looks at it, I think she also gives a little bit too much attention to complexity theory, the stuff that produces the pictures like the Mandelbrot set and so on. So it's not that I really like the way that she puts it, but on the other hand, I think it is quite compatible with Bernardo Kastrup's proposal, which I'll get to in a moment. So, in short, I think Bernadette Brady is quite close to the proper solution. And here's a quick tip. If you want to know more about this Stoic notion of Sympatheia, which is, I think, quite important, I recommend this book. It's called Sympathy, A History. And it's just very interesting. And then Richard Tarnas, he is really a philosopher and also an astrologer, and his famous book Cosmos and Psyche, that lots of people know. In this book he points to Jungian synchronicity also as a framework for understanding how astrology might work. And that's basically the same thing that Bernardo Kastrup is saying, but there is an important difference. And I mean, if you are still watching this video right now after, maybe 10 minutes, then you'll probably know that in Synchronicity there is this standard story, or really a cliche story, about a scarab beetle. I'm guessing you've heard of it. And the interpretation of Synchronicity that more or less sticks to this story, that doesn't go any deeper, but only looks at the direct implications of that example, that's maybe Synchronicity with a small s, I would name that, or scarab beetle flavor Synchronicity. And that's more or less what Richard Tarnas relies upon. And Bernardo Kastrup, he just goes a lot deeper, a lot further. So he's more into Synchronicity with a capital S, so to speak. And how did he arrive at this? Well, Kastrup has taken a very close look at the exchange of letters between the theoretical physicist Wolfgang Pauli, who was very important for just big new developments in the beginning of the 20th century in physics. And he was for a while a patient of Carl Jung, and they started collaborating on the subject of synchronicity. And that's basically the best source material we have. And Kastrup has looked at it very carefully and applied his logic to it, and then made a few extrapolations, so to speak, of his own. And that's when he came up with this flavor of synchronicity that I think is really astrology friendly, to put it like that. And well, let's just say what it's like. It's basically, according to Kastrup, the whole of nature, and so you're talking the whole of the universe, really, the whole thing, is, according to Kastrup, ruled by synchronistic principles. So let that sink in for a moment, and then you know the scale that we're talking about. So yeah, well, I'll call that synchronicity with a capital S, or deep synchronicity, or something like that. And you could even, there's a joke I came up with, you could even think of it as the universe as scarab beetles all the way down, like the turtles, but no, it's actually scarab beetles. Okay, now for some astrological context. If we go back to Robert Hand's challenge, we could say that there is really, in practice, there's just one thing only that all astrologers can agree upon. I mean, these people, there's a lot of infighting, but there's one thing that astrologers all can agree upon, and this is the famous Hermetic slogan, as above, so below. Now, let's look at that a little bit closer. Let's see why everybody can agree upon this, and what is that statement really saying? Can we analyze it? It is really small, but maybe we can get something out of it. So personally, I see three main elements here. Number one, there's an above, or the sky. Number two, there's a below, or the earth. And then crucially, number three, there is a relation between the sky and earth. This relation is really the core of it. And now let's make a little jump in reasoning. I mean, since all astrologers look at the sky, that's what they do. And since pretty much the only thing that unites them, that they agree upon, is their interest in some kind of a relation between what goes on in the sky and what is happening on Earth, I would propose that a coherent, astrologically friendly philosophy should also be relational. So I'm looking for a relational philosophy, that's what you could say. And what I mean with that is that pure relationism, no, that's not a word, just pure connection or association should be at the heart or at the core of an astrology-friendly philosophy. And well, that's just words, and maybe we should add a few closely related words, like, for example, correlation or resonance or sympatheia, like Bernadette Brady was suggesting. But basically, these are all different flavors of the concept of relation and association. And well, I'll just throw them all together for now, and maybe we can then later find out which words are the best, so to speak. So I hope that you are with me so far, that you agree with what I just said, that we need relation and interconnectedness at the heart of a astrology philosophy. And to give you an idea of alternatives, you could say, for example, no, I want a hierarchical worldview. That would be an alternative to this association, as this interconnected worldview. Or maybe, I mean, going back to Plato, if you are a bit of a tinkerer, you might prefer Plato's worldview that gives an important role to artisanship. I'm talking about that famous story of the demiurge in Plato's Timaeus. The guy who creates the anima mundi, the world soul, like a carpenter. But to me, I mean, I think I'm also going to drop in the word organic here. I think that this interconnectedness of astrology is also organic. And to be perfectly honest, my opinion is that Plato's demiurge is not really working very in an organic way. It seems more like a cosmic IKEA assembly kit to me, and I don't believe that this kind of creation myth is a great starting point for a modern theory of astrology. And to be honest, I don't care that everybody thinks Plato is one of the most important philosophers ever. I mean, that's still true. And it's not like I want to throw away his archetypes or ideas or anything, but I'm just saying that at the end of the day, I don't want a, leaking, creaking cosmos built by Plato's craftsman demiurge. I don't believe that will be very organic and relational. So, generally speaking, I mean, there are many ways to get a cosmic show on the road, so to speak. There are so many creation myths from all over the planet, but not many of them are really putting the idea of radical interconnectedness at the heart of it. And that's really what I'm looking for. And there's a few ideas out there that resonate with it, like Indra's net from the Hindu mythology. And if you want to get properly postmodern, like postmodern astrology, you could even think of Gilles Deleuze, the French philosopher, his concept of the rhizome. But those are things that I could get behind. But of course, I think Bernardo Kastrup's suggestion is better. That's why I'm making such a fuss about it. Okay, to make another point, why interconnectedness seems so important to me is if you look at the history of astrology, we can say that traditionally people think of astrology as a very broad phenomenon. You can call it holistic. The planets rule all kinds of things. Their fingerprints are everywhere, and like I said, in an organic way. Because according to tradition, astrology has something to say about stuff like the fate of civilizations, but also your romantic relationships, the timing of volcano eruptions. I'm just making a mess of it here, right? Movements of the stock market, your career choice, your character of your pet, condition of your liver, condition of your legs, condition of your eyes, your ears, your mama, your papa, your sister, your brother. And it makes me think of this expression that Americans have, the whole enchilada. It's about everything. And that's why I think we need a philosophical foundation that's not just radically interconnected, but also really, really broad, really holistic. If you want to be more, if you want to use a fashionable term, you could say inclusive. Because if astrology is an all-inclusive deal, then its philosophical foundation should also be all-inclusive. And actually, it would even still be better if the foundation of the philosophical foundation is even more inclusive than astrology, so that you could also use it to explain, I don't know, cartomancy, how do you, cards, tarot, or telepathy, or magic, which is often, entangled with astrology in various ways. There's some confusion there, I think. So, that's what I'm looking for. And now that I've set that stage, I think I'm going to reveal to you another very simple principle. So we already have one simple principle, as above, so below. And how do we connect that with Bernardo Kastrup's Synchronicity? Well, Bernardo Kastrup has also come up with a very, very simple principle, and I think you're ready for that now. So, drum roll, please. His principle is association by similarity. And that's it. And that's really all you need to remember from this video, association by similarity. If you just get that between your ears, then you've taken away a lot from this video. And this is the only principle that Kastrup needs to, so to speak, to build a whole cosmos. A relational cosmology based on the theory of synchronicity that first was developed by Carl Jung and Wolfgang Pauli. Now, I'm not going to explain the whole thing, like how you build a whole cosmos from just that simple principle, but I will give you a few hints so you can have an intuition about it. For example, Kastrup, he explicitly connects this principle of him, association by similarity, he explicitly connects it to the way our brains work, our neurons, you know, when they fire. And he also compares that, he takes that brain metaphor and takes it to the next level, and then he compares the whole universe to like one big cosmic brain. So that is a type of metaphor that he uses a lot in all kinds of contexts. That's clearly on his brain, and that should immediately give you some idea of why I also think that Kastrup's proposal is astrology friendly, because I think a cosmic brain metaphor doesn't hurt astrology at all. Unless you are a materialist, of course, but that's I think we've left that stage behind us quite a few, like 15 minutes ago. So, because certain details of Kastrup's theory are not easily explained, I will just advise you again to buy his book and read it very carefully, probably not once, but more than once. And also what I will do is put some videos of Kastrup explaining this thing in the description, so that will also maybe help. And then there's another resource that I will also put in the description, the website of the Essentia Foundation. That's I think Kastrup is director of it. I mean, he has a lot on his mind. He has also started an AI company. That's a whole different story. But he is also very much involved with this Essentia Foundation, and they promote actually Kastrup's flavor of idealism. It's called analytic idealism, and they promote that with a very wide range of interesting videos, interesting content. Okay, let me try to give you a little more context for that association by similarity principle. But this is not simple, so maybe you just want to skip what's following. But try to wrap your head around this. Association, it might seem like a mental or psychological concept, but if you know a bit about idealism, you know that it is also connected to how matter originates. If you don't know anything about idealism, you will probably be scratching your head right now. But if you do know about idealism, this is actually, you know that this is really at the core of that metaphysics. You could say that under idealism, matter is more or less created by mind, or mentation. There are various words that are used. Another thing to keep in mind is that according to Kastrup, association by similarity also generates the so-called laws of nature. And I mean, this term laws of nature is very popular, but I immediately also want to say that especially in this context, it is much better to speak about the habits of nature, and that is more or less the same thing that Rupert Sheldrake does, the morphic resonance guy. Rupert Sheldrake, he also talks about habits of nature, and that is really the way to think about it in the synchronicity context as well. Because, you know, laws of nature are really old-fashioned kind of stuff that a guy like Plato's demiurge would use with his harmonic relations and his you know, whatever is going on there in his recipe. It would be like laws of nature would be like some eternal manual that was there even before the demiurge started tinkering, and that would be a manual for, cosmic IKEA furniture or something. But to me, that just seems like old-fashioned ideas that we need to get rid of. And well, I think I'll just finish this part by saying that in principle, it would seem possible to create a Jungian kind of cosmos using Kastrup's principle. And that's what cosmology is. It is thinking about how stuff comes into being. And to me, it makes some... I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me, and I hope that it makes some sense to you right now. And if you want to get a more detailed idea of how such a thing could work, I just advise you to go read Kastrup's book. I am almost done with my rant, but finally I want to take a step back because I've been talking a lot about this idea that Kastrup offers us. But I want to take a step back and see if there are more similar examples of worldviews that are also based on relation or association or a certain amount of similarity, just to give you a little bit of extra context so you can, just compare or maybe pick and choose, whatever. So I think the classical one that astrologists would think of would be the thing that's called the harmony of the spheres, right? That is Kepler revived that notion. It's very old. People talk about Pythagoras, but Pythagoras got his stuff from everywhere, from Egypt, from Sumeria, Babylonia. So harmony of the spheres. Well, I know a little bit about music. And personally, I prefer to think of this concept really as a poetic thing, as a poetic metaphor that should not be taken too literally or even too seriously. I mean, it is poetically, it's very sound. It's a great concept, but at the same time, musical harmony, and that's what we're talking about, musical harmony is a very, very subjective phenomenon. So to give an example, if people from Indonesia or Bali who like the sounds of the gamelan, you know what that is, the metal bells. If these people were to make a harmony of the spheres and do the calculations for a harmonic cosmos according to the harmonies of the gamelan, they would come up with something completely different than the folks in the West who prefer to divide the musical octave in 12 equal parts. And let's not forget that Pythagoras got into a lot of trouble when he tried to do that, to divide the octave in 12 equal parts. That never worked because he found irrational numbers, and then that was the beginning of his big headache. But anyway, in the West, you have this harmony. In Bali and Indonesia, you have a completely different harmony. There's no objective standard to be found in musical harmony at all. So, harmony of the spheres is nice and fuzzy and so on, but it's not a serious alternative to what I just talked about, that deep synchronicity. It's just not on that level. On the other hand, Sympatheia, the Stoic concept, I've mentioned that I think Bernadette's Brady reference to this concept makes a lot of sense. And I think Sympatheia is probably a close cousin of Synchronicity or something like that. So if you are interested in that concept, I would say check it out. And here's that book again that I recommend. Morphic resonance. Rupert Sheldrake, I already mentioned him, and I think that is a modern scientific concept that very closely aligns with Jung's collective unconscious, and I really like it a lot. And I think Sheldrake's experiments can tell us a lot about how certain parts of the collective unconscious influence life on Earth, and how they influence the whole of the material world. And I mean, there's also like you can find discussions online between Kastrup and Sheldrake where they are really very close. Not they don't say exactly the same thing, but you clearly get the impression that there's just details that need to be ironed out. So morphic resonance is a very closely related concept that I can fully get behind, and that I think is in the end completely compatible with what we talked about earlier. And then there is something that is a bit more vague, the Akashic hollow field. Maybe you know Irvin Laszlo. He basically says the same thing, but he formulates his stuff much less scientific, I would say. I mean, I respect Laszlo a lot, but I just think that Sheldrake is much better at creating a proper narrative and practical hypotheses and experiments and collecting evidence and so on. I think that's important for adoption, and I think in the long run it will be something that scientific-minded people can work with. And I don't think that Erwin Laszlo is on that same path. I think he will be judged more as someone who points in the right direction without, you know, showing all the evidence. And finally, one last thing I want to mention that is a classic. You have this idea of correlative thought that is associated with ancient Chinese philosophy. It has its origin in the I Ching, Yin Yang, 5 elements, and so on. And this type of thought produces all these kinds of literally associations by similarity that we also find in magic, and of course in astrology. You know, when you start comparing all kinds of stuff because of these associations by similarity. That's what astrologers did a lot in especially I think in medieval times, although I should be careful when I say that, but somehow I associate these correspondences with that period. And I hope this is evident enough for everybody who has been watching until now. And I won't say too much about it, because to be honest, I don't even know that much about it. So I'll just stop here then. And I'll say one last time, get that book by Bernardo Kastrup. Every astrologer should read it. Everybody who does cartomancy or magic should read it. And that's it. That's all I had to say. So, bye-bye.